All right, we're live. Good evening and welcome to the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee, January 18th, 2024, here at Memorial Hall and Town Hall. This is our 13th meeting of fiscal 2024. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body, as well as members of the public, may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at the location in the agenda, and it is possible that all members of the public body may attend remotely, with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting may be accessed remotely via the link in the agenda. When required by law or allowed by the chairs, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely, as noted. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 28, Charter Channel 192, or via Westborough TV's online platforms at westboroughTV.org and youtube.com/WestboroughTV. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed by Westborough TV, and we thank them for their support. Okay, good evening. Seeing no one for public comment, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is just our discussion of our annual town meeting. First off, tomorrow night, Tuesday night at 7:15, there'll be a public hearing on the fiscal 2025 budget. That's right.
Which night?
Not tomorrow night.
20.
Oh, it's Thursday. Sorry. Next Tuesday night.
Strike the record.
I'm off by a day. I'll say that at the next meeting. Okay. Anyway, yes. Next Tuesday night, which would be the 23rd. It'll be at 7:15, and it's a great way to either tune in or be there for a going through of the budget portion of our town meeting material. And we will also be having an all-day budget summit on the 25th, which is a week from today. And that begins at 8:30 across the street at Forbes. So first thing I wanted to cover, I guess, was just to find the right piece of paper for that. Today, this afternoon, I just sent out two things. One was the updated budget list. Rod had asked, and what had happened last year was we had an extra column in our budget table, which was not there this year, and they were able to put it back in for us. Specifically, that was what was actually spent last year, which is a good number to look at versus otherwise we just had what was budgeted last year.
I think it was in the detail, it just wasn't in the summary.
And in all the detailed sections on all the departments it was there, but now it's nicely set in the table. And I'd like to thank Christy Williams and John Steinberg for pulling that together for us in a quick fashion. And Rod, thank you for your suggestion.
I have a question on that. So this
Put that
budget
mic a
table.
little closer to you so people can. Thanks.
So this budget table, can they share that on Excel as well? I'm sure they must be having some kind of Excel sheet having these numbers too. So we can go back, maybe crunch some of the numbers. Do they have such Excel sheet as well?
I just converted it to
Well,
Excel.
Yeah.
That's what I did as well.
You can get
I
the
have that as
PDF
well,
off the
yeah.
website.
I just, yeah.
We're
I've
really
already turned it.
hesitating to ask our finance department for anything at this
Yeah.
point, because there are multiple people shy.
Yeah,
I will happily send
Um,
out the version I created to everybody
and-
who would like it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
the
I don't know how
others-
much more crunching it needs, but you're welcome to crunch, but
What if?
I think you might be better off looking in the detailed sections
Yeah.
in the individual departments,
Mhm.
because there's more information there, usually even another year's back budget, I think, sometimes, who knows? Okay, so that was one thing off our list that was good. At the budget summit, we're gonna hear from, I think it's about 6 departments. We're going to, well, partially, we're gonna hear a budget summary, but then we'll hear from the finance, on the finance department budget, which is gonna be changing in some warrant articles, because they want to, obviously add some people there. There'll be, also a couple general bylaw amendments. And just note that where it says Article 7 and Article 18, those are the actual bylaw articles, not the article that they appear of in the warrant, because that does change. But that's the general bylaw 7 and 18. And then the rec department and community development, I think it's specifically the conservation portion of that. We'll hear about their budget and articles. I think these are places where people are getting, are being requested ads. We'll wrap up the morning with the DPW, and then after lunch is police, fire, and then the school, and then just general discussion. So it's a very long, full day, and looking forward to that. We will have one more meeting Monday before that next week. I was thinking originally not having it, but it'll be a remote meeting, won't have to be too long. And since we have 2 other meetings that week, I thought remote would be best. So I will send out the agenda and link, but Christie would like to get AFSA reserve money for legal fees, as well as getting some help in the finance department right away. And then our town clerk, Deb Ledoux, is looking for some transfer for the
Clickers.
the little clickers for town meeting. And I believe something like printing costs for the local election ballots or some such thing. But I don't have details on those, but we will on Monday. And also trying to, I believe the only money we've spent out of reserve, which I need to also verify, was the request for the interim treasurer that we did last summer. But I need to see how much is left of the 230, and we'll see what the requests are. So I will post, that'll be the main point of the meeting. I did also include in the posting that we could talk about anything specific to town or budget too, just in case there was some small item. But my goal with that is just really cover those remotely and call it a night. Okay, so just went off and decided to tell me what's new in Chrome. That's exciting, but not that exciting laptop. Okay, so next I'd like to sort of walk our way through the articles. So I'm going to try and share a screen here if I can find the documents I want. So far, we're still operating at warrant version 1. I expect what usually happens is Christie launches those right before the select board meeting. So I would expect by next week we would have whatever changes they're up to in a version 2.
How late can a citizen's petition be added? Or is it, we already passed that?
No, we haven't, nowhere near it.
Oh.
It's before the warrant closes.
Oh.
And the warrant will probably close at the second select board meeting of February. So somewhere around, I don't know the exact date, but,
What do you have in mind, Brian?
I got all sorts of ideas. I'm just kidding.
No, I attended, I don't know, anyone attended the school meeting yesterday? I think they're planning to put across a warrant for the roof. I think last week or a couple of weeks back, there was a roof leaking in the
Yeah,
school.
the roof at
Hastings.
Hastings failed.
Hastings, yeah, so Amber told yesterday that they will be adding a warrant.
well, they'll be asking to add it. It's up to the
Asking to
select
add-
board
yeah,
actually to
yeah,
decide
yeah.
what's on the warrant, but yes.
That's right.
I'm sure they'll put it on, but, yes. And we can cover that, in a bit, but, let's go through this first and then we'll catch up that. I think we can get to that during, thing. So my goal tonight is to sort of try and look through these and see who we might know now that we might want as guests. I might be able to make this a little bigger. Okay, and I have my little list here anyway. So we don't vote on the election, so that we just go right to the reports. And if the Advisory Finance Committee voted against hearing their own report, that would be a shock to me. So I would kind of move on to prior year bills. Usually we can cover this with some other visit of someone dropping by. Right now, it's a very small $164 bill, so I don't think that would necessitate a special visit from a guest, but sometime when we're talking to recreation anyway. The golf club budget, this is also fiscal '23, so neither of them are that exciting. I guess we'll get some explanation of legal expense budget maybe at the meeting we're going to. If not, we'll have Christie come back for that. Obviously, operating budgets, we go through those, and the actual budget, while the table currently shows the town manager's budget, what it will show in the warrant is the AFC's budget. So we actually vote the proposed budget on all these lines. So we will probably start taking that up after the budget review, and we'll see if there are ones we want more detail on or not, and then we can start that process.
Do we have the ability to change the budget or just say yes or no?
We have the ability to make our recommendation for the budget.
Okay.
And just like any, but of course, at town meeting, someone can change,
Yeah.
have a motion to change it up or down to some amount. So yes, this is the town manager's recommendation to the AFC, and then we actually recommend to the town what the budget would be.
To be clear, though, as the groups come in, we have the opportunity to try and convince them that they may
Right.
want to think otherwise, just to get or not get our favor for whatever they recommend. So
Yep.
in that regard, we do have a little more flex than most folks who'd just be doing up and down the town, so.
True. Okay. So I'm gonna, we'll go through the budget in more detail another time. Okay. The elections, so Article 7, I think it's reasonably straightforward. I don't know that, does people think we need a guest on this? It's really a decision to move it out of a department budget because it varies up and down each year by huge amounts depending on whether it's a year like this. It's got local and presidential and state elections, or like next year when there'll just be some local elections, no state elections, and then the middle ones where there's a little more. So by doing it as a recurring article, you can make it easier to vary, I think, than showing it as a budget that's up by 300% or something and then down by 70%. It also has the opportunity to come from free cash, which I understand some of the refunds, money we get back from the state on the state elections would fall to free cash, so some sanity to that.
I do think it's one where the change makes sense to me, right? I can see why they do it, especially if it's a huge variance. But because they're not presenting it now in budget format, we're just getting a sum total. I'd be interested to see the detail, right? I mean, just sort of as a matter of format and practice, I think it would make sense for us to see what makes up that $106,000.
Okay.
Again, I don't think there's a whole lot of debate and discussion, but I would be interested to see the detail just so that we can have done our due diligence.
I had my pencil, I could write that down.
Sure.
Okay, so I will ask for that. Okay, that seems like a fair question. Okay, so then, next up, regular recurring articles are reserve funds. I think that's straightforward. Stockings under pond. Stop me if you want. Anything to cable TV, these are all annual things. July 4th, Hazardous Waste Day. Small grant program, we might want to have them come in and give us a little update like they did last year.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll circle 8F. I think that might be you.
I'd be happy to reach out.
I think you're our liaison.
Let's do it.
And we can give them a date if they have one interest. Tuition reimbursement, would be with Tristy at some meeting. Okay, capital improvement plan. I did have a question on this, and that's Andrew. I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but you're our rep to the capital improvement committee that sort of formulates this plan.
Right.
We got a lot of new people here, including myself. I don't fully understand that process that committee does. If you could give us a little brief oversight of
Sure.
how that works, and, do you have a list? Do you throw out some? Do you wait for some, or
Yep.
just give us some background?
So the process has pivoted a little bit right now. So even if I'd said something about this a year ago, it changes a little bit every year. In the last 3 years, the biggest change that's been made is that the old way of doing business, and the way that I think most people still remember capital expense planning, is that the idea is we'd hang $1 million available and determine how we would apportion that $1 million amongst all the different activities that are going on. The pivot that's taken place is that there's a lot more different projects now that are moving into the capital conversation, so that the capital expense planning committee is no longer viewing its work just as, choose the $1 million that we're going to recommend, but look at the full scope of all capital plans for the entire town, which means you'll see things like the $15 million change that's coming in for some of the school projects, or the $9 million. So where you would usually see just the $1 million, there's now a free cash line that we would address, and that's actually up to about 1.3 million now. But you'll see, as part of the capital plan, all of the different elements that come through that go through this. Now, if we just looked at the 1.2-ish, 1.3 million for the capital expense that comes out of free cash, a lot of the same things that would be normally part of the conversation are showing up as part of that discussion. Police cars that we need to replace on the recurring basis. The kinds of things you'll see, whether it's police, fire, ambulance, and some of the supplies that they get, or, gosh, I'm trying to think, rec shows up on there as well. All of these elements are discussed, and the decision is made to vote up and down at the end as to how many of the elements, or if there are any elements, after we weigh them all, if there are any elements we would want to take off the board or not recommend. But after we've looked at the whole project, the work, the sourcing, the budget, funding is going to be discussed. That's presented to us as a single table, and then we vote on the whole package up and down. So there was some discussion by me about how it could be a little more strategic, but I think that the pushback's the wrong word. The perspective that was brought for the town, the new pivot, is that our goal is really just to understand the entire budget plan, and then going in and doing micro changes as we've done in the past is not really, if we're seeing enough value in it, it's not really what we want to do. So the effort of the budget, the capital expense planning committee, is to provide the full suite and generally up and down the whole thing. We do have conversations about things we should push out, things we could pull in. So it's not that the presentation or the exercise is without its changes or merit, but I think that where we used to be much more hands-on involved in that $1 to $1.2 million, we're now taking a step further back and just approving the general strategy of the plan. So,
But you are still, when, somebody shows up with a thing, whether that gets in or not before you vote the whole big thing, that's still discussed?
yes, everything is still discussed as
reviewed
before.
and-
And in fact, it's even more comprehensive, because most departments have a 5-year budget plan. They also talk about the 10-year plan that a lot of them are developing, but really our only focus in the end is gonna be what appears now, and as we discuss back and forth. So one of the things that comes up are things like the roof that we're talking about. We had a strong opinion about how we wanted to make sure the school was staging their money a little bit better, and so there was how it was allocated, and some funding was pulled around, moved around. So over years, you'll see a change, but our vote really is for that. The key vote is really for what we're planning on executing on just for that year. And all of the other things we talk about would still have hit our budget. It's just a more comprehensive capital conversation to bring it in for a first line of questioning and pushback and, thought from all of the different stakeholders. It's not that different from what we see here. Those same stakeholders show up here, but I think that the way that the capital expense planning committee now is working is just to make sure we have an eye on the longer term plan, and there's things happening downstream that we'll have input on that is outside the scope necessarily of the current year budgeting stuff that we're going to be doing. So Kim is responsible for taking all the notes, and I have some of the old documents we worked on. I don't know that we have produced a final deck that's going to be shared, so I can reach out to her about what the individual tranches of the money are and what's coming from where. But in the end, from what we see here, it's very much the same thing that we're going to be going through, and that we end up pushing back. It's just now all being discussed in a more comprehensive manner. And in all fairness, I've seen the town do some things that are smarter about the way they're managing things, like the fleet conversations, and things like that come up in a greater level of detail than we might have had here as we talk to fire or police or what have you. And I think some of those decisions about pulling it all together came out of conversations about pushing for it as a more comprehensive capital conversation.
I just had a question on
Yes.
that. So when you're evaluating these projects, do you just look at the merit of the projects based on current year, or do you also look at, let's say this project involves borrowing, look at the overall borrowing we have done so far and the borrowing that's expected for this project, or you let it be on the AFC to determine whether the
So-
borrowing should be done or not?
It's a good question, because I did ask, again, I went specifically to the conversation about borrowing and how we should look at it, and the feedback that I got was that all of that is being managed as part of the larger budgeting program, and that we don't evaluate necessarily on the pros and cons of how it's going to get paid, although there is definitely feedback and conversation about it. The question of merit is a tough one, because the way that they bring each of these projects there, there's already been a pre-evaluative effort made so that each of these projects is evaluated on multiple criteria: impact to the town, impact to the budget, impact value. And so by the time we're looking at it and considering it this year or perhaps next year, it's already something that's been evaluated as something that is very high or critical in need. So I think that's one reason the old method of rank and stack them and just lop the stuff off the bottom till we hit $1 million, I think that's pivoted a little bit, in part because we have more free cash. And so the idea of making sure we're flexible with our free cash, because that's the money we have to play with, terrible choice of word. It's the money we should be banking against, so I apologize. But I think the idea is less to be critical of it than to ask questions, to push how we prioritize things, which ones really should be considered, which projects we should be evaluating, or how we should be presenting these things in a way that can be defended, not just to the capital expenses planning committee, but to groups like ours as well. So there's a lot of give and take. Select board is represented on CPC. Obvious with the Kim there, the town's representative has somebody at the table. So I think it's, again, taking a step back from, we're not doing a rank and pick sort of thing. We're just trying to make sure we have an understanding, and that we have, at least in some way, that there's an evaluation that can be made about all of the items and agreed upon for some priority. And again, I tried to push for certain areas where I thought we could try and pull a little bit off. The feedback from the team was, we're really just sort of blessing this as a larger project and making sure that they've thought everything through as they put it on, so.
And ultimately, each one becomes an individual article, if you
Yep.
will, a subpart of this article that we're talking about now. So we get to decide if we recommend it, and also town meeting gets to decide whether they want to buy it.
Absolutely.
It's just, and so I think that pre-selection process you talked about is also true of the warrant articles we get to some degree.
Yeah.
It's usually not stuff that completely makes no sense, that arrives as being on the warrant.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think part of the conversation is that we're providing some early pushback and areas where there needs to be conversations, yeah, and I think about the conversation about the police shooting range is in it, because it's part of the longer plan. It's a time to say, hey, these are the things you'll want to think about as you're considering bringing that in a year or two. It's not the time we would say, no, you can't do that. We're not voting on that, but it's the time to say, these are the conversations to think about. There was a conversation, for example, about some of the DPW, but I think the one that stands out in my mind was a particular piece of equipment that's used for water rescue.
Right.
And there was a discussion about how it's used, and it's a several $100,000 piece of equipment. And I know that where I kind of went with the questioning, and I'm presupposing this because I don't want to betray other people's feedback and stuff, so I'm not the only one doing the talking, to be clear. So, but the place where I came to that was that if it's not really used that often, is this something we could buy with another town? And the robust conversation around that was, well, this is something that comes back to saving a life. And if it ever came down to competing with another town, we don't want to have to say that we gave up the opportunity of spending some money or gave up the opportunity to save a life because we didn't want to spend so much money. So win, lose, or draw, those are the conversations, and they have to know that that's part of what the questioning will be when they come into it. And I think it's a dry run for where they'll get pushback. Also, I tend to ask a lot of questions. There we go. It happened. This side of the table, represent.
Thank you.
But
And that's
so I
a
guess if any-
big
yeah.
part of the, a big liaison job, I guess.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, I can imagine that.
Anybody have any questions? Welcome to bring it up at any time.
Yeah, so just one, I think I originally sent the note to you, and then I copied Christie and Walter. So the wastewater treatment plant does not get involved in you don't look at those numbers from a capital planning standpoint.
So it appears as part of the capital spending, as part of what's happening. So for example, there's certain things that come from the country club that you will also see as well. It's part of because it's a capital expense for this town, it'll be discussed, but where the funding tends to come from dedicated resources, whether it's, established funds and stuff like that, that would be less a place for us to be interjecting as to making changes, because the assumption for any of these, the words escape me.
Enterprise.
Like the reserve
Enterprise
serve
funds.
areas.
Yeah.
Those are areas that would be presented, they take questions, but certainly the conversation in the room is much less about pushing back or challenging those, because again, this is now part of the plan, knowing it'll still go before select,
But
still come before the
just
board.
not to interrupt, but the wastewater treatment plant, I'm told, is not capital projects are not evaluated by the capital plan. That's what
So
Chris
I guess
said.
I'm not sure which one you're talking about, and Ron, I owe you an apology because
No,
I'm
that's
way
okay.
behind on my.
No.
this.
No,
But there are projects that are evaluated, so I will double check to see if
Yeah.
that one appears in the presentation book.
Because when I asked Christie, she said they're not evaluated by that, so we can just double check.
Okay,
Well,
I was-
see,
I was
sewer
surprised.
projects probably are and water projects, but maybe the wastewater treatment plant itself is not. I mean, if that's. what
yeah,
Christie
that
told
may
me.
be, yeah, if it's not being funded by
Yeah.
sewer or water, perhaps. But I guess I'm not sure where the funding for it would come if it's.
Well, it comes through sewer.
Is it from sewer?
It comes through
I guess
sewer,
I'm just-
but it's also multi-town.
Yeah.
Well, I will
Anyhow,
say
there's a
that
little
in-
nuance there, so.
In years past, we've drawn this, now we're drawing a larger and larger circle about what gets counted as part of the capital expense
Yeah.
planning committee.
Yeah.
Like 2 years ago, there was even some pushback as to how we were factoring in schools, which now they've moved the whole conversation there as well. So I think this is just an evolving way of us looking at the capital expenses,
Yeah.
like more holistically.
Yeah, just putting it on your radar.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And honestly, there's more than lip surface just paid to make sure we have a plan, and there is pushback and questions to make sure that the town is thinking about all these things, conscious of where our expenses are going for our loan, our loan interest and stuff like that. So while we didn't have the sheet right next to what we're doing and figuring out when loan money is falling on and off, as long as we agreed that this was in a sufficiently assessed priority, it was part of the plan and it was generally agreed to.
And that's where actually I wanted to follow up on that as well, to Rod's point, that do you have any kind of priority given from the select board, like, this year, these are the goals, or these are the priorities we're gonna look at? So even though we holistically evaluate everything, but then we know that the priorities for this year are, and we soon will realize we need that because, everything is now coming down to the capital
Well,
expenses committee.
I think that's an awesome question for Christy, because this is a conversation that was started last year, and some folks in this room will know that, is that the idea of putting our budget together and where changes in expenses need to go and the strategies we made should be tied back to priorities on our numerous different things, whether it's the town priorities, the
Master
clean,
plan. All that stuff.
all those different priorities we as a town say we have. So no, it's not part of the capital expense planning committee, but underscore, it's not part of what we do here or
Yeah.
what we have seen the town do as well. And they do a phenomenal job putting the book together. Take
Yeah.
nothing away from what they do, but there's definitely something of a disconnect between, they'll talk about these are the priorities and then here's some of the things that relate to that, but I don't know, I think there's some sense there could be a better through line for
Yeah.
the entire budget,
Exactly.
I have seen in some of the ones where people write up justifications, they will point out that this is a priority in the master plan or in the.
If it happens to line up.
If it happens. I'm not sure that the ones that don't, maybe they don't. Yeah,
Right,
you
they don't
just
include that
ignore
one.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is not in the master plan.
Yeah.
Okay, in terms of Article 9, every single piece of equipment here falls under groups that I believe we will hear from at this next all-day summit. We don't at this point need to schedule any of these people to come to talk about any of these systems, because I think we should be able to hear from them they'll go through the capital requests as well. And if we end up not satisfied with enough information from that, we can bring them back if there's something thought of later. But in general, please show up prepared to get your questions answered, because that's what this time is for.
And incidentally, the spreadsheet I was talking about is played out here in numerical form. The spreadsheet obviously might be something that we could use internally or share internally. Not that we wouldn't share it publicly, it's just, it is, what we did on that spreadsheet is entirely consistent with the list that they have here.
Got it.
So just, Walter, strategically, there's a lot of articles here. Is it our intent at the summit meeting to just listen, or are we going to debate each article? I mean, if
You can ask questions, I don't know about debating,
Walter doesn't like your phrase.
Yeah, I mean, our point is to hear their presentations and ask questions, so if you want to challenge a presumption, assumption, or argument, that's in bounds, but I don't see us arguing with the fire chief or somebody about arguing, I think is.
No, a debate doesn't have to be
Oh, okay.
good or bad.
No,
Yeah.
I
It's
think what
less
you're
of a
saying is
debate.
debating the merits among ourselves.
Right,
We won't
That we could
discuss-
probably do after the fact.
Yeah.
Because it's not,
okay.
we'll use that time, though, to gather any information you
Okay.
need, any
Yeah,
questions
do
you
mean
have, any
debating with
information you
the
need from
presenters
that.
or debating ourselves?
Well, I just meant, I mean, when we've had them come in the past, we'll spend 20 minutes, a half an hour on each article, and because there's a back and forth and trying to understand and understand the merits, et cetera. My memory from last year was more a cursory, here's kind of cursory what we're doing, but it didn't seem like it was an occasion where you have everybody in the room, and the finance committee may have greater interest in some
Sure.
things than
So what
other people.
I think then we should do is if there's certain ones that particularly interest in these people are more than willing to come back and
Yeah, okay,
discuss it further. And we certainly will discuss it before we vote.
yeah, okay.
Yes, so.
But
I
don't
think
hesitate
to
to
the
ask
point,
questions.
yeah, don't hesitate. There's always a point with questions on by section. It won't go in this order. It'll be like the fire department presenting
right.
all their articles.
Right, right,
But if you have questions on those articles, it's a good time to
okay.
at least get those basic things out. But sometimes you get home and you think about 3 other things. So that,
Yeah.
we have a fair amount of time between now and when the book has to be done in mid-March. So that's why we're starting early, so we can get up to speed. But and we certainly will want to discuss it amongst ourselves too. And as we found, at least as I found in the last special town meeting, discussing it ourselves while the experts are in the room is actually a better thing, because you can get questions answered that often we either
Right.
come up with the wrong answer or don't know and have to go ask again anyway.
Right.
So it wouldn't, I certainly expect the schools to be back in here. They always come in for a session beyond that, just because it's such a big thing and they have so many things. And I'm sure if there are specifics of the other ones that we want to explore further, I think that's what we should probably, in our minds, we can talk about at the meeting after this, that, these are ones that we want to hear more about or don't need to.
Yep. Okay.
And sort of sort through it,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Maybe I was just shy last year.
Yeah, well, it's also, there's a lot of information over a whole day, and at some point, you're a little overloaded
Yeah.
by the late afternoon when you're talking about some of the, the police, fire, schools are the afternoon, and, to my brain, it would be better to do those early when I had more, the most energy, not the least, but, it is good to ask questions, and, we can't go on for 17 hours, so there's some limit, but you can see what you got for questions. And
So Walter, on that, could we preempt our questions before the summit or the public hearing so that in their presentation, they can cover those questions as part of their presentation?
if you have any specific questions on, the people that are presenting, I'm happy to forward them to
Sure.
those people, because they probably would cover it in their presentation, or at least be prepared to
Right.
answer that. But that's up to you to decide
Okay.
that you want to send that information. It's not a requirement. I find that often by reading these things, I don't understand it as well as when someone goes through and presents what the things actually are. Some of it we do. We've bought enough 6-wheel dump trucks to understand what a 6-wheel dump truck is by now, but there are some other things that are far
Yeah,
more
yeah.
complicated. But yeah, by all means, in all cases, if we have questions for people, that's why we also have the liaisons, we can sometimes at least get some answer that way and then follow up as needed.
And I think
Yeah.
you also mentioned about the public hearing being open to us as well. Like, of course, the public will be there, but we are the public as well.
Yes, so at the public hearing, we are not posted as a group, which
Yeah.
means we can't discuss amongst
Amongst
ourselves at the public hearing.
Right.
We can be there and you can comment or ask questions as you.
As you.
And if someone had a question for the AFC, I suppose I could try and answer it.
Sure.
But we should not be discussing, just like sort of what Rod said, we could discuss things at the all-day forum
Summit.
because that's posted.
Yep.
But not likely given the format because there's, two other boards there and lots of people and not that much time. But, so at the public hearing, yes, you're very welcome to ask questions or participate. But, yeah, Gene and I won't be sitting next to each other talking about the merits of this particular department budget or something.
Yep.
But we can do it here
Got it.
the next week. Okay. This is a little undefined at the moment, but I suppose we'd probably want to hear from Historical Commission at some point.
Mhm.
I will circle that, someone that we will reach out to. But they got to finish their article first. And certainly this open space, I think unless it's covered, it's at this thing, but I don't know that it will be. Article 12, we probably need somebody to come in and explain what's going on. Article 13, these are DPW, so I assume we will get we'll get some of that anyway, and we'll see if we need more. Library, definitely library building group will be in. Okay, this is open space conservation. This may be discussed at the summit because that's part of one of the topics, I think. Also, there will be a public hearing for this. I'm pretty sure. We'll find out when that is. Article 16, this we can ask the Affordable Housing Trust more information. Okay, the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, the next 6 are going to be DPW, but are covered at the meeting, but we'll see if there's more information needed. Probably accepting the road, maybe not, I don't know, but some of the other stuff's far more complicated. This is the 2 that currently Article 23, which is to amend Article 7 of the general bylaws that Christie will speak to at the meeting. And the next one is Article 18 of the general bylaws, which is currently Article 24 of the ATM. She will speak to also, which is some minor changes in the development department. This, the Historical Commission, so I'm going to assume that we wanted them probably to tell us about Article 10, so we probably want to hear about this from them. So I don't know if we have, probably don't have a liaison to the Historical Commission because it's probably an as needed, so I will reach out unless, I'll have to look up my list. It's just as easy, that way I can schedule them.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
There you go.
We haven't had them here, so, since I've been here anyway. Conservation Commission, I'm expecting we'll hear some of this from Jen at the meeting, because she's representing conservation. This is a big one, it's lots of pages. And I think what they finally, this is Article 27, Planning Board, we'll probably want to hear about that. If we didn't, there will obvious, there was an information center on, meeting on this that I went to, and there will certainly be a public hearing on this as well. Okay, so that's it for the current article list. So from that, I have details, we'll hear what we hear at the meeting, plus details on the elections budget, small business grant program, historical commission, and some of these other studies, library repair, acquisitions, transfers from the Affordable Housing Trust, and historical commission and planning board. So that lets me start trying to get some people in the early things, and then we'll work from there. That sounds good. Okay, I don't think we're in a position to vote any articles other than perhaps the town reports, but there's no point in doing that today. Future meetings, so as I touched off, we'll be meeting Monday briefly, hopefully, on all remote. And then there's the Tuesday night unofficial meeting for us, but budget hearing. And then there's the all-day thing, so that's enough. Following Monday, we may have a meeting, if I can get somebody lined up for that, maybe Affordable Housing Trust or something like that. It really depends on their availability or historical, if I can. If not, maybe the following Thursday. So we may float one of those meetings till we get a little closer to the real warrant and start bringing in, but we could meet actually and try and digest some of the stuff from the Thursday meeting, so it probably makes sense to meet that Monday, I think. Okay. So that's the plans. Any liaison reports? Actually, maybe you could talk a little bit about the school board meeting. I did watch part of it, that the large snow we had froze the roof drains, and then it rained and water leaked.
So, for those of you who don't know, Hastings already had roof replacement slated for FY26. So they had, I don't know all of the backstory, but there was some issue with both HVAC and roof. Once they did the HVAC and roof, they would have tripped the requirement to do the ADA accessibility updates. So they had pushed out the roof and were going to do ADA and HVAC in FY25, roof in 26. It had been slated actually earlier until Armstrong's roof had failed. They were installed the same year, the same product, same roof. Armstrong's failed first. They replaced it and pushed out Hastings with the ice and then rain.
Armstrong used the ARPA funds.
Right. That initially had been slated for Hastings, though,
Right.
until
Right.
the Armstrong the roof failed. So between all of the snow that accumulated and froze drains and then a lot of water, they had some pretty disastrous flooding in the school. I know because I was home with my 7-year-old who did not get to go to school.
Get another opportunity later in the year.
Yeah, so they'll have to make up that one day they missed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's fun for me. But so the school committee voted last night, I mean, really just to have Amber continue with the process of drafting the warrant article. They are going through the state emergency funds, which would get them circumvent some of the bid requirements and stuff that are typically required for a large construction project, with the expectation that they really don't have any choice but to start sooner. So we'll certainly see that. I don't know how much the Armstrong roof was, but I would guess that it would give us a reasonable estimate of sort of comparable price, because it sounds like it was a pretty similar situation. But we should have information sooner rather than later, so. And I guess Steve had made the comment that 90% of the engineering work is already complete, sort of on that roof, because they were already planning on doing it with ARPA funds previously, so.
Right, so it sounds like they have a design, they gotta get some kind of cost estimate so that they could have an article.
Yep.
So we will see that article. They probably talk a little bit, since they won't have all the information probably by next Thursday. But they probably will at least talk about it happening at that point.
I think they'll have a pretty decent idea, so I'm sure we'll hear about it Thursday.
Do these have any insurances as well?
The
Yeah,
insurance-
so they did file an insurance claim. Insurance won't cover the roof replacement, but it will cover the damage in the
Okay.
interior of the building. So
Okay.
there was not significant, but there was certainly some damage. I don't know, 100 roof tiles and classroom stuff. She made the comment they were fortunate, it wasn't the sort of tech room that had flooding. It was largely classrooms in the interior of the building, a lot of hallways and interior.
That's insurance.
So not really significant damage internally, but yes, that would be covered by their insurance.
Ceiling tiles.
And that can be, would that still fall in ARPA funds? Like, could ARPA funds be allocated if they are available?
There's no
If
more
we had
ARPA
any-
funds
It's
available.
Right,
gone.
I mean, I would assume they could, but yeah, it's gonna be a couple $1 million and we're out of ARPA funds, so.
Yeah, I don't, maybe in this budget book somewhere, there's the ARPA list again. I'd have to bring it up, but we could see what that was for Armstrong. Okay, anybody else? Gene?
I did connect with Chief Parcells about the engines that have been ordered. I think it was actually Beth who asked about it, who's
Yeah.
not here, but she'll read it in the minutes. So the first engine that we would be taking delivery on, there's two engines, has been pushed back. It was supposed to come in like this month. But last week, it got pushed back to an April delivery. The company is experiencing delays in supply chain, just like everyone else, and backlogs since the pandemic.
Or other people willing to pay more for?
No, they're actually, everyone, he assured me all the departments are sort of experiencing the same delays. And in fact, this company's not taking on new towns. They would take another order from us, but they wouldn't take it from an order from someone else until they work through
So
some of their backlog.
It's moved nominally from February to April,
Yeah.
so far that's only 2 months.
Well, I don't know this for a
that the
fact,
first
but
delay, or-
there might, this might be a second delay.
Okay, it feels like it might be.
Yeah, he suspects,
June?
he hasn't been told that there's a delay on the second engine yet, but he suspects that one will also be delayed for
When
months.
is that due?
So that one was due a year from now, so he suspects that'll be a year from April. And he said he wouldn't be shocked if come April, there was another delay.
Sure.
But he, he said there's not really much he can do about it. He expects that they'll be in. Also, there's an ambulance that he suspects now will be pushed out to September. That's one of the reasons why there's a second ambulance warrant now, because of the long lead times for getting all these vehicles delivered.
In fact, I think we pushed up the second engine by
We
6
did.
months instead
Yep.
of waiting for town meeting or something.
That's right,
so-
that's
To
right.
get it into the queue.
Yep. So
Okay.
that's the update on the delivery of the engines.
Okay, from the library front, they did an initial cost estimate. They got it to us too close to our meeting to really have gone through it enough to fully deliberate on it and talk about it. We got an overview. So we're gonna meet again in, it's about a week and a half from now, to wrap up the recommendation on the repair effort, and then we'll have them here to go through the information in more detail. So that is progressing. Interestingly, this time, we have to decide at that point whether to go design, bid, build, or with the manager at risk. This estimate showed the manager at risk being more expensive for this size project. And so probably more likely be going with a more traditional design bid build on this, but the committee has to decide that. That's the general sense I got out of it, and I think that's about it. Okay, any others? Nope, okay. We have minutes to approve of January 8th, 2024.
I had one revision.
Okay.
So, in the section that talks about the cost overrun,
Well, let me bring it up for 1 second here. I think I can do that. Maybe. January 8th. All right, I just have to share it. Draft minutes. Share. Okay. ARP allocation?
yeah. The section that starts DPW Director down one, there you
Yeah.
go. DPW Director Chris Pan explained the bid was over by 100,000 for construction, which makes the total cost of the project go up. Mr. Shafford stated he would agree only if they only charge based on what spend and not a lump sum. So we were talking about the $220,000 for the design fee, not the 100,000 for the construction.
Yeah, so this sentence here should really go here.
Yep.
But, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, that makes sense, yes, because you were talking about, we had a discussion on why the project management costs were so high, and he thought they had left a lot of slack in there, so.
Yep.
And so did you. I agree, that makes more sense. Any other changes? If not, I'll take a motion of as amended.
Shafford, motion to approve as amended.
Bradley, second.
We are nobody remote, so we can just vote, all in favor. That is 8, we have 8 here, right?
Yep.
Anybody opposed? No, okay. 800, the minutes are approved as amended. I will send these to Laura. Thank you, Laura, for doing these. I will just do a real quick, stop sharing that. Okay, anybody have anything else? If not, we will.
I just have one
Yeah.
quick sidebar. So, one of the things I've been noticing is the high cost of design on a lot of our projects. And, you know, it came up on that article specifically, came up again at the wastewater treatment plant. And, you know, I had a discussion with John Arnold. Originally, one of the reasons for the Finance Committee was to review professional services contracts. It's actually in the bylaw that that's one of our responsibilities. We haven't done it in a long time, mainly according to John, because we now have more professional staff have that capability. But I'd be interested in having a discussion about how some of that gets contracted and how we evaluate. Because for DPW and wastewater treatment plant, typically they use the same engineers over and over. So there's no check and balance in terms of what the fee, and people have come up with percentages that may or may not be right, and even those percentages are applied to different things, and I just think there should be a general strategy about how we hire professional services.
Okay, do you think, I'm thinking out loud, but that is something we might deal after
Yeah, it doesn't have to,
this
yeah,
town meeting?
yeah.
Like, as a something for the spring,
Yep.
as a topic. It's really interesting, because to me, having been on the library building committee now too, the interesting effect is the architects get paid more if they design a more expensive building, because the fees are based on percentage
Sure.
of the cost. So, and even sometimes that makes a lot of sense to me, but some of the things that might be incremental, it wouldn't make sense to me
Right.
that they get paid more because it's not doing more work, but that's the way the industry works, so
Well,
it's
it's not
completely-
necessarily how the
Yeah,
industry works.
okay.
I mean, I think from a procurement perspective, right, I mean, that's something that certainly I would be interested in looking at how we manage those, how we, I know that the central receiving for the town is a relatively new,
Central
Central
purchasing?
purchasing?
yes, that's
Yeah.
what I meant to
But
say,
central-
sorry. Is
yeah. I
Central
mean,
purchasing is
Schwab,
a relatively new concept, a relatively new idea, and I would be curious how that has an impact on some of those contracts, or if there are more opportunities there. I do think that we have a whole committee with a whole variety of expertise that might really be able to provide value in some of that discussion around how we manage these things as a town. So I think it would be an interesting conversation.
Yes, and we certainly could bring in Schwab and find out more about it. I know she certainly participated when we were doing bids for architects and owners, project managers, and helped us with that, and they all had various fees, but they were all somewhat similar, I think, anyway, but it's an interesting process anyway. Yeah,
I'd
that
be
sounds, that
curious to
seems
hear
like a
her
real good,
perspective, too,
yeah,
on the process.
can be our, there's a pretty good gap, other than doing end-of-year transfers from the end of town meeting, usually all the way through the following, September or August. August, I guess, would probably kick up again, but, and that's certainly, probably in April and May, maybe we can dig into that a bit more, and probably chat with you a bit then too, to figure out what the best, how do we talk about that, or what do we?
Yeah, right, right. But I mean, there's some articles coming up for this session where it's design fees we're talking about. So
Mhm. Yeah,
some of it's apropos.
right, but most of these things don't change in a day, and they already have their quotes, so if we do our jobs right, maybe next year they do it differently or something like
Yeah,
that,
but
or
I
maybe
think-
we
I think-
understand why they did it
Well,
right or something, I don't
There's
know.
nothing to say we can't challenge
Yes,
or
On the design
debate
piece.
the merits
Right.
of the,
yeah, understand. Okay. Motion to adjourn would be in order.
Shefford, motion to adjourn.
Dolan, second.
All in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Westborough TV.